1995, James Okon shocked the archaeological world with the discovery of a massive, lost landmark of Maya engineering. The long-span suspension bridge at an ancient city in Mexico, now considered to be the longest bridge of the ancient world. The structure was overlooked by scientists who had studied the site for more than a century. In this new book, The Lost Secrets of the Maya Technology, Okon recounts the thrilling realization of his discovery and how he used modern methods to examine and prove the existence of a spectacular bridge. The dugout canoe through the swirling waters of the Jacinta River, spider monkeys swung through the veins, and toucans and macaws flew amid the towering tropical rainforest. We were traveling downriver to the Maya city, sitting in Bo. I did not realize that I would make the discovery that would change my life forever. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we welcome the author of The Lost Secrets of the Maya Technology, Mr. James Okon. And we are back live on the Jackal's Head here on PSN Radio and SoFlo Radio with our guest of the evening, Mr. James Okon, the author of The Lost Secrets of the Maya Technology. Welcome to the show, sir, and it's really an honor to have you on. I love the book, may I add, real quick.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here.
I've spent the last 2 weeks going through the book. It's a very interesting read. I didn't know, I knew a little bit about the Mayan technology and the Mayan culture, but I didn't know about a lot of the stuff that I read in this book. For the audience who might be like me that didn't know a whole lot about the Mayans, tell us a little bit about, what you found and what you put into this book.
Well, the goal of the book, as you haven't told yet, I'm an engineer that has been fascinated with the Maya for over 40 years and have visited their sites and studied the culture, etc. And there was something missing. Something really missing was how did they build those great cities? How did they become so smart? How did they develop these independent sciences and cultures in the isolation of the Yucatan? That's what started it. And nobody had any answers for me. So I put together papers over the years that I delivered at international symposia, and about 3 years ago I started writing the book, which you've just read. So I wanted to let people know that the Maya did it all by themselves. They had a 3,000-year history. They had lots of time, and it was done right down there in the Yucatan, home cooking, and born in the Yucatan.
Yeah, and you just said they're around for 3,000 years. That is the longest civilization that's ever been around, for 3,000 years, right? That's the longest a civilization's been around?
That's the best we got to, it's the most continuous, most lengthy, continuous civilization. There's other countries that have been around, like China, for 3,000 years, but there's been interruptions, and there's been not vandals, but that was in Rome. We're talking about the Mongols and those guys that came over and broke up the party a few times. But yes, 3,000 years, give or take 100 years, and that was the Maya length of time they had to get everything right.
Now, 3,000 years, what could a civilization do in 3,000 years? For example, they had a long enough time to contemplate the cosmos, develop their cosmic philosophy, and, of course, assist in developing the calendars, which we still use today. Exactly.
They concentrated, okay, what did they have to do at night in the early civilization when they started building their civilization? You had a great night light show, a transparent sky that must have been absolutely stunning with, you can see all the stars, all the movements, slow movement of our own galaxy, the roamers, you got the planets and the visitors that came by occasionally, like the planets and the moon and the sun and their functions with each other. There was a lot of issues to solve. Counting periods of different heavenly bodies, naming them, just keeping track of things. That developed into, of course, a great understanding of astronomy and their unbelievable ability to do mathematics and develop one of the world's 5 written languages. So by the time the what they call the pre-classic period was sort of halfway through it, around the 300 BC, they had a fully formed alphabet, and not an alphabet, a language, and the math and all the other sciences were well along. What they started doing then was they wanted better places to live. They wanted to be able to live year-round in a place like the environment of the Yucatan. Had 6 months of rain and 6 months of dry weather, and had to develop a system that would supply water year-round. They had to build roads through the jungles that were passable at any time because of the rain, and the jungle is really rough down there. And they developed these technologies, tools harder than steel, because the closest iron ore is 1,500 miles away from the heart of the Yucatan. And you just don't develop iron tools when you don't have any iron to build them from. So they built better tools than iron, as it were. So the technology is what I talk about in the book, as you read.
Now, how would you explain then their cosmic philosophy? Well,
now, a lot of this stuff I had to work out on my own because archaeology didn't talk about this. They talked about having a cosmic philosophy. They talked about that it was a quad-patriot philosophy, a four-part philosophy, but they never explained much about it. So I had to do a lot of research before I figured out how this quadripartite philosophy developed into a belief system that developed their astronomy, their mathematics, and one of the world's 5 original written languages. And then that blossomed into the technology which built their great cities, their roads, the border systems, and all the things that I've been talking about. But how did they develop it? We've been a nation about 235 years. Just imagine if halfway through our early period, it was 1,000 years. Just think we had another 800 years to work on sciences and develop technology. Look how far we've come in 200 years. I mean, I couldn't even begin to think of what we're going to have in another 800 years if we don't.
No kidding. I mean, we went from horse and carriages to the moon in about 100 years.
We didn't have horse and carriages 200 years ago. We just had horses.
Right.
And wagons. But
and
that's
wagons,
right. And I don't even try to get into that, but they had 1,000 years to get their cosmic philosophy right. And it was not a religion. It was a system of timekeeping. They were absolutely obsessed with time. They believed in the quality and the quantity of time, but they believed in linear time and cyclic time. Linear time is like between now and next night. That's tomorrow night, 24 hours. And cyclic time is like being able to cycle back in time, pick a date for, say, a coronation or a celebration or a war, and then cycle forward in time so that you could pick that date. We'll talk about that later because that's where our December 21st came from that cycling back and forth. That's sort of like history repeating itself. But they looked at the cosmos as 4 parts, and they could take an event in time, and they would take the 3 elements of space, which is X, Y, and Z direction, and put time with it. So 4 dimensions of time. When they designated a certain time, it would be complete with the 4 dimensions that could be moved backward and forward in time. And the closest thing we have to that is the space-time continuum that physics uses, which is a 4-part quadrant system. And that it was complicated. And they developed people that obviously they took the brightest and the youngest, the brightest people, and turned them into scientists and astronomers and whatever they needed. Now, they supported the priests because the priests needed the calendar, they needed the time cycles, and they needed all the help they could get in calculating cycles, etc. Well, you probably read about this new discovery down in Guatemala at Saltun, which is a new calendar. It's only the second calendar that archaeology has discovered. The first one was in one of the 4 surviving books that survived the Spanish burning of all the books. And this is the second one that the first one ended at 13 Baktuns, and this one goes to 17 Baktuns, which is another 1,200 years. And that would take us to 3,232, which gives us, we can forget about next December 21st. And with the new time extension, that would mean when you wake up that morning, the worst thing you got to worry about is there's only 4 shopping days until Christmas. I mean, if you go and buy the Maya, stick with them. If something stopped at 13 Baktun, and if they found another calendar with 17 on it instead of 13, you just go with it. Because the Maya had no intention of the world ending at this time. I mean, do you know that date of December 21st, 2012, is only written on one single monument of the 40 or 50,000 that's been discovered? One single monument, a broken monument, at a place called Tortuguera, and it says, "He shall come down and get dressed." I mean, a very unimportant god. So he's going to get dressed. I mean, what does that mean? Nobody knows what it is, but everybody that has a tendency to be a doomsdayer has decided what it means. I think it's just another day in the calendar. It's like Y2K. Next day starts a new millennium.
Let me ask you a question, James. How long ago was it that they started the calendar? Was it 3,000, 5,000 years ago, something like that?
Yeah. Well, they didn't start at the time. They got really deep into astronomy, and they developed a concept, and you saw this in the book, of of the wobble of the Earth is. The axis takes 25,600 years. And they discovered that period. And I'm going, well, that's pretty good. How did they do that? I don't know. I mean, even if they had 1,000 years, that would only be 1/25th of a 360-degree cycle, right? So, but they figured it out. And so they decided to divide that into 5 parts, so maybe it was more manageable. So the 5,126-year cycle that you just referred to was called an era, a world, or creation. Right. And so let's say, Angel, you and I were 2 astronomers back about the turn of, let's say about 100 BC or so, and we're trying to figure out, okay, here we are, we're in a circle. Of course, like Johnny Cash said, the circle is unending, right? So, the circle doesn't have a beginning, it doesn't have an end, but you got to get the starting point, and you got to get a reverse. You got to get a ending point. So they did their cycling of time, and they cycled forward to a time that would be very good, a good ending for this first 13 Baktuns, which is a time when the sun at the winter solstice on 21st of December would be in alignment with the dark rift in the Milky Way. The Maya call that the womb of the way.
Well, here's the thing. My response to everybody who comes up with the whole doomsday scenario for the end of the year here, I always say that they just simply stopped because they're like, you know what, whoever comes, a few hundred years from now can continue. We're done. That's a lot, of time to put together. I think they were just done. And people are using it really, and it's amazing, James, how many people and religious people are using that date to really put fear in people and to brainwash people into thinking something is going to happen. Everything from Hollywood with their movies to even politics. Everything is at a standstill because people are actually afraid of what might happen, and it's like you said, nothing's really going to happen.
There's a large percentage of the population, I say 10 or 15%, that's large, that really, really believe in this. Everybody else, sort of like, well, it's like the other end of the world scenarios we've had, even Y2K was one. But when they got that date, they cycled back. You asked about the beginning. They cycled back 5,126 years to the date of BC 3,126. 114. It was April 14th. I always like to joke and say it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They didn't have an hourly system like we do. So that's how they got the beginning, and that's how they got the end, because it was 1/5 of a cycle of the wobble. Now, that may be getting too complicated and may bore a lot of people, but that's how they... If you ever want to know how they started and got the end, that's how it is. But only one date is given for the end, and that's at Tortuguera, and no place else does anybody even know about it. In modern Maya today, living in Mexico and Guatemala and Honduras, have no concern over their date. They don't use the Bactums anymore. They have.
James, what do you think made the Mayans so intelligent?
I think that they had a propensity for fascination for the skies, as many ancient civilizations did, but they centered on the 3 elements that really counted with the stars. Of course, it was the stars themselves. It was astronomy, and then it was the mathematics that was needed to calculate these long-term cycles that they got into with Venus and Mars. And the amazing part to me is always their almanacs they developed for the lunar and the solar eclipses. They were just amazing. And then they had to write something. They had to keep a record, and they developed this very unusual-looking script, the most graphic-looking script of all the written languages. It's beautiful. And they developed 600 to 800, depending on who you want to believe, 600 to 800 character chart of logarithms, not logarithms, logograms and mathematics. Logograms and sonograms, which are it's a phonetic language. So they developed that, and they got involved with the stars, and then they got really interested into the math and astronomy. Just like today, we got guys that are devoted to mathematics. We got guys that are crazy, and this guys are men and women too. I'm talking about, and in writing, we got lots of people that teach English and write about English and are just unbelievably fascinated with the language. So we're no different than they were. They just had we got a bunch of other things that we got more we got going, but they had those 3 big things. Then they had all their engineering with the civil engineering and the building of the buildings and the building of the infrastructure and the tools and the art and the architecture, and that was enough for them, because that was even more than they had back in the Middle Ages. And when the Maya were going through the golden period, which is called the Classic period, Europe was going through the Dark Ages. I mean, when these towns were 100,000 strong in the Maya realm, London was a 9,000 population, 9,000 people living on a dirty riverbank. So they were way ahead of their time, and when Mother Nature struck with that unbelievable drought of the worst in 7,000 years, around the year 900, they put an end to their great civilization and destroyed 98% of the people. That put an end to the study of mathematics and the stars, etc. Even though afterwards the books continued to be written and the language, there were literate people who survived. There were only 300,000, but they made sure the books and the knowledge of reading and writing survived.
I wonder where they got the first spark, though, to start, looking at the cosmos and to start putting together, how does that happen when you're, a civilization that far back in time? It's amazing to think what they did and what they accomplished so long ago. Listen, James, we're joined on the line now with a caller, Hollywood Rape, who is a good friend of the show here, is on the line. Hollywood, you're on with James Okon.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Sir.
Hey, what's up? I had 2 questions primarily for your guest.
Okay.
The first one is, how prevalent was sun worship in the Mayan civilization?
Okay. The sun was not particularly a strong factor in worshiping. They had other gods that were more different than the heavenly bodies. I'm including the sun. Like the Egyptians took Ra as the sun god.
Right.
They didn't have a sun god. The sun ruled the day, and there was a god, the chief god called Izama, who ruled the night and ruled the underground.
Right,
So,
like Set, like Sun and Set.
Right, exactly.
Or Horus and Set, right.
Yeah.
So they didn't have a sun god, but the sun god was an important player because his wife, the moon, was in the form of a goddess called Ishtal. And Ishtal was a famous goddess of women, childbirth, witchcraft, unbelievable stuff. And when they look at the moon, and I do this now because I've been under their influence so long, I see a rabbit. Not the man in the moon. I see a rabbit with his ears turned to the right. But if we saw it on full moon, I could point out the rabbit, and you would never see the man in the moon again. You'd always see that rabbit because it's a great story. Because she was not a faithful wife, and the sun caught her making love to a rabbit one day and threw the rabbit in her face, and there it stands today. And there's also statues in the Maya collections that people have found. You know, the archaeologists that show Ishil, the beautiful lady with a rabbit in her arms, which is her lover.
She was making love to a rabbit?
Hey, different
Wow.
stroke.
No kidding. Whew.
Yeah, I did a cartoon on that when some Guatemalan told me, "What are you doing that for?" Everybody knows that story. No, they don't, I tell them. I'm going to be showing this around Atlanta, and they don't know the story. It's a good story.
I can't even wrap my mind around how that would even work.
I don't think it was a technical issue. I think it was more of a fable.
It's more symbolic. It's more symbolic.
Right.
There you
It has
go.
to be.
There you go.
Gotta hope so.
My second question then is, in my younger days, I used to hang out with a person who considered himself a Moor, Moorish Science Temple, and he showed me a video where the Moor on the video was trying to say that the Mayans, the Aztecs, that they predated the Egyptians, and I want to know what you thought about that, if that was true or not.
Well, let's take the Aztecs first. The Maya, the end of their civilization was about 900. It was like 890 to 910. The Aztecs were a wandering tribe of wild and woolly characters called the Chichimeca, and they didn't settle down until 1213, which was 300 years after the Maya collapse. So they came so late that they weren't in the picture when the Egyptians weren't around. But let's go back with the Maya. We went back 900 years to the turn of Christ, the time of Christ, and then another 2,000 years when they had an organized civilization. Well, that puts us back right in the middle of the Egyptians, way before the Romans,
Right.
way before any other civilization. Maybe the Etruscans were back then, but yes, they extended back into a period parallel with some of the dynasties in the Egyptian world.
How about the Sumerians? Real quick, how about the Sumerians? How would you, put them to decide which would be an older civilization, Sumerians or the Mayans?
I think the Mayan, actually. Or they're about parallel. I can't remember exactly when the timeline for the Sumerians is. I have to get on Google to find that out. But they're close. It's close. They were all back 2,000 years before Christ was really old. And wait, the actual timeline goes back 8,000 years when the Maya started, and they started actually cultivating corn. Corn's not a natural grown crop. They had to spend hundreds and thousands of years developing a native seed plant into corn. So that was way before the beginning of this 2,000-year period. So there's more history back in that time, but it was mostly agrarian and hunters and gatherers and stuff like that. And they didn't start their real thinking and their cities until about 2,000 years before Christ. So, or the common era.
Any questions for Mr. James?
Excuse me?
Any more? You have another question for Mr. Okon?
Well, yeah. Just to correlate with the second question I asked him. So, is it true? Because another thing I heard about from these Moorish Science Temple people that I met before, they were saying that the Mayans and I guess the Aztecs that they actually dug tunnels, intricate tunnels in the earth, and that is that true? Like where they had like societies and cities and all that under the earth?
Not that I'm aware of. And remember, the Aztecs didn't come around until 300 years after the Maya collapse. Now the Maya that survived the collapse of the horrible drought did grow into towns and cities and stuff like that, but they never had the big cities again. They never went back to the big cities, and it was 300 years into this, what's called the post-classic period, which everybody calls it, before the Aztecs started their empire, and that was about the same time the Incas started down in South America, and then 200 years passed before they became a real empire. They were just built a town 300 years later. It was 500 years before they actually had an empire in the central of Mexico, about 1,500 miles to the north of the Maya. And they did have connections. The Maya had a deal with them that they had to pay tribute every year. And it just happens that the Maya had to supply 400,000 rubber balls to the. So the Maya had developed vulcanization. Actually they got it from the Toltecs, and they could make from their rubber and from the juice from the morning glory plant, which had a lot of sulfides in it. They could make bouncing balls that were really live and lasted for many, many years. So they had a secret process for making balls, and the ball game was very big in both the Aztec and in the Maya world.
Mm-hmm. And what's your opinion, real quick, what's your opinion about those who say that the Aztecs and the Mayans and all the South American civilizations got their intelligence, or lack of a better word, their knowledge from alien beings?
I have no evidence of that. The only association I have with that is my publisher also publishes Eric von Donigan.
Right.
Which is the only that's a real far reach. But as smart as the Maya were with their mathematics and astronomy and the written word, the Aztecs did not have the math, and they did not have an alphabet. They did not have a written language. And let's go down to South America. Here's the powerful Inca kingdom, which was also killed by Pizarro, the conquistador. They didn't have any written language or mathematics. They just had a system of knotted ropes that we don't know how to interpret it yet. They could pass messages and pass mathematical messages along with these knotted ropes. So they didn't have the kind of really brain power that the Maya had, which developed. Somebody said their script, the language was so sophisticated they could have written Gone with the Wind. It was so sophisticated. But the three of them were not equal in intelligence, yes. Were not equal in far as accomplishments in the sciences. And I have seen no evidence in the Maya of anything that would hark to some kind of extraterrestrial or alien assistance.
Intervention?
Yeah. In fact, their buildings are made like an engineer would make them. Since they didn't have any beasts of burden, they didn't make any stones, very, very few, that were more than 100 pounds that a man could lift and carry with the tumblon, which they use as their main carrying device, because there were no beasts of burden at all. Well, down in South America they had the llama. It could carry 65 pounds, but a man could carry 100. Llama ate 14 pounds of grain a day. A man ate two pounds. What's the deal? I always thought it was a better deal to use a man-powered dump line than use the llama.
Mm-hmm.
That's where slavery comes in. And many other things. The Sumerians did talk about a race called the Anunnaki, and they called them the gods that made us. Let's speak a little bit on the Mayans' religious beliefs. Who were their gods? I mean, who were the gods they worshipped again?
Well, they had a whole bunch. In fact, they have so many that the archaeologists, people say, you're not an archaeologist, you're an engineer, and I got to tell them this. I had to make enough money as an engineer to afford to be an archaeologist. Because these guys go to Harvard and they get PhDs and they're really bright, but they make no money. They stay in the field half the year and teach half the year, and they get half of a poor salary to live off of. So you've got to come from a good family most of the time. That's got some trust funds, but they call them God K and God B and God R, and they've got very few names. Like I named Isamal and I named Ishul, but there were just a few primary gods. We only have one in Christianity, for instance, in all the religions. But they had a few, and some were good and some were bad, and they had a god for merchants and a god for war, and I'm not real. That's not my area. In fact, I asked one of my really good friends, the French archaeologist, to review my book. He sent back an email. Sorry, Jim, I'm not much on technology. I'm big on sacrifices, rituals. But next time in Paris, I buy dinner at the Ritz. Okay, I figured that's better than to do the book. But that's right. They know the ritual. And one thing, if you recall, I wrote about at the beginning of the book. This is not a book about religion or ritual or family. This is about engineering. And while I know a little bit about that, and I know enough to get by, I can't name all the gods. It's like being named, like, I'm a Catholic. I can't name all the saints. There's so many of them. Yeah, but they did have some major. They had the corn god. They're coming back now. They had the sun was one of their gods, and the issue was a big popular god with the women. And because Isamal was like the number one god, and they had all these other, like God K was the god of matriarchy. I guess it all comes back, doesn't it? Some of it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, they had a bunch of gods, and it was they all represented a specific activity, like merchants or war or something like that. So there wasn't any all-knowing, all-seeing God except Ishamal. That it was God of the underworld.
It's one thing that always amazes me about every single civilization, every time that you read about any of them. They all have gods, and it's prevalent that it doesn't matter what the civilization is, what the time period is, but they all seem to have a god that they worship under. That's an amazing thing that we always have to have a god to worship, whether it's one or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. No matter which civilization in which part of the world, there's always a deity.
Right.
And a ranking system, too, of different gods.
That's amazing.
And the reason why I asked about the whole sun worship and God thing was because I in all these different civilizations, whether it be ancient Japan or ancient Egypt or Mayan or Aztecs, I realized that the engineering, what you were talking about, always tied in with what was going on in the stars. You see what I'm saying? I'm
glad you brought up engineering because that's what my book is about. But the thing is, the gods in the Maya world did benefit from engineering because the temples were unbelievably high, set on these 270-foot high pyramids. Heck, we didn't have any buildings in the Western world that were even over 100 feet high until 1800 in Chicago when they built 1880s in Chicago when they built skyscrapers. So when they built their pyramids, they built them up high, so they would be the temple on top of the pyramid with its what's called a roof comb. They have another, like an armature structure, and it was full of sculpture, mirrors, wind whistles, and bell tones and stuff like that. That the wind would. It was a sound and light show at the top of these things, and it would paint their buildings. They coat them in in stucco, and then they would paint them bright colors and mix in mica with the paint, so they glittered in the sun and they glittered at night in the moon. They were an amazing sight. It was all engineered, but it was part of the game.
Now, James, I have a question for you about the engineering aspect here of the Mayan culture. Looking at the book, I'm looking at the pictures of, some of the structures they created. What kind of technology could they possibly have created to create these things? I mean, what technology really did they use, bottom line, to create some of these amazing buildings, buildings you can call them, or pyramids even?
Yes. Well, chapter 6 is how they discovered how to make cement. Like this, it's so similar to modern Portland cement. It's amazing. But they did this. They found a method of making a thermodynamic reactor out of wood that was self-sacrificial, a 20-foot diameter cylinder with an 18-inch hole in the middle, and they'd stack chunks of limestone on top of it. And they start the fire in the middle, which would be like, I call it the firebox. And the temperature would go up, and the pressure would go down, and it would suck air in from the bottom in these special little chambers, and would mix this cool, oxygen-rich air with the fire, and it would cause the fire to be hotter, and the pressure to go down, and cause faster flow of air. And this cycle continued until they got incredibly high temperatures, like 1,400 degrees Celsius, that it took to melt limestone to turn into cement. That's all you have to do to limestone. Melt it, and it becomes cement. So they had this system that worked, and the center of this reactor would shoot fire up 100 to 150 feet in the sky, and it would be blue flame. And the reason, I have some accounts by really smart, brilliant archaeologists was using this technique to make cement to reconstruct Chichen Itza back around the turn of the 19th century. And he described the flame and the color. Now, he didn't have the slightest idea what the blue meant. The blue meant it was the heat that was required at 1,400 degrees to melt the limestone. And it was amazing. And we ran a test on this. You may remember the photographs in the book. We ran a test, made a scale model. It was only 1/20. We were in Austin, Texas, and I figured if I made first of all, I couldn't afford that much wood. I made a full scale 20-foot diameter and 12 feet high, and we started it a fire, and it would shoot a blue flame of about 100 feet in the air. I would still be in jail. I got to tell you that. The fire department in Austin would have come after me, and it would have taken them forever to put it out. But anyway, we made ours about 4 feet in diameter, and you could see the flame in it. It was just shooting straight up in the air, and nothing else was burning, just coming out of that hole like a flamethrower. I knew that we had hit pay dirt at that time. We had, we told how it was going to be made. We showed the buildings. We ran laboratory tests on the testing of the cement to show that my cement was almost similar to the modern Portland cement we use today. And then we did the test of with the model, and there you go. And then we showed the buildings. We showed how they developed the basic building block was what we call the Maya arch, and it was a structure came up and sort of had a sort of a linear, but not a curved interior, and not square, but rectangular outside. They could put these arches that were usually about 10, 12 feet wide and about 20 feet deep, just about the size of a Maya house, a traditional Maya house. Because that's how you start building something. You build it like people have always built it. Then they would build these horizontally. They wanted to go vertically. They would stack the walls one on top of another. And I have drawings in the book that shows how they did this, and pictures of palaces. There's 5 and 7 stories high, which are higher than anything in Europe at the time, or until a long time after that. So that's how they did it, and a lot of it had to do with trial and error as part of this this time period. Okay, but that basic Maya arch was their Lego, their building block, their Lincoln log that they used for all their structure. And when they build a round structure like the observatories, they just curve the arch in a horizontal plane and build this circular building, which was hollow on the inside, of course.
Now, since you're saying that they developed this over time and they had no outside influence whatsoever to their culture, how did the Mayans evolve their scientific civilization then? I mean, how does one, put this knowledge together?
Mm-hmm. Remember I talked about the 2,000 years and what we've done in 235 years? So they had a long time to develop the sciences, and humans have, like we talked about gods, they have a tendency to develop social stratus, and they developed hierarchies of elite, etc. And the elite figured they needed better houses than the workermen and stuff like that. So they started building palaces, and then came the pyramids. I mean, there are so many pyramids. There must be 50 or 60 pyramids in the Maya zone, while there's only like 5 or 6 in Egypt, something like that. And these became a symbol of your success as a king. And most of the pyramids, the big ones, are built one on top of another. A king would build a good-sized pyramid, and he would die, and another would come along and say, I could do better than that. I'm more confident. He'd build a bigger one right on top of it. And then if another one come along, they build a third one on top of that. So in fact, one of the towns is called Uxmal, a big city, and it means thrice built, and it has 3 layers of pyramid that makes up the big pyramid in the middle of town there. It's not a town; it's a city.
So each layer is one dynasty, pretty much. Each layer is a dynasty of.
They didn't have dynasties. They lasted for 3,000 years, and they were one of the reasons they lasted so long is because they had these independent city-states. Nobody ever came to be powerful enough to take over everything, but once in a while there would be, a couple cities that had a big battle, and one would take over the other for a while, and the other one would take over the first one. But mostly they were pretty balanced out, and they relied on each other because they had the same culture. They relied very heavily on each other for the big business. The big business of the Maya was trading. They traded with themselves north into Mexico, and in these big trading vessels that they had, like 50, 60 feet long, would go into the Pacific and go into the Gulf of Mexico and all through the Caribbean and down through Central America, trading jade and feathers and obsidian and all the valuable kind of things that they had that other people didn't have. So they had a really big business and trade. So it didn't pay anybody to go in and start a bunch of wars because they'd lose their trading partners. It's like today you're afraid to, do too much to China because we owe so much money, and they're afraid to do something to us because we're their biggest customer. So it's like there's sort of a detente that was built up over all those years, and these cities respected each other. Well, there was wars and stuff like that, but they pretty well were independent, so they didn't have a big empire.
James, have you heard of the name Edward Ledskalan?
I don't believe so.
He was the gentleman who created the Coral Castle down here in Florida. Homestead, Florida.
Yeah.
Now, Edward used leverage as part of the way to move stones from one end to the other, and he, of course, was very secretive about what he was doing. A lot has come out since, and people are saying that he used leverage, and he might have used old technologies that were prevalent to maybe the Egyptians, the Mayans, Sumerians. Do you think the Mayans really used leverage, kind of like what he did?
I know they used leverage, and I've seen the size. I've seen films on his work. He moved some pretty big rocks.
Yeah, by himself.
Coral stone. Yeah, by himself. The Maya didn't use that kind of big stuff. If they made a big stone, they wanted a big chunk of rock to carve in a building, a palace, a temple, or administrative building. They would make a big cylinder out of it and roll it across the ground, across the highways that they had. These highways were 30 feet wide and paved, so they had the good surface to roll them on. And they'd pull them, wrap ropes around them, pull them along the ground, and then when they get to the building site, they'd carve them up there. Because they didn't have any capability, they didn't have beasts of burden, and they had to move them. So the leverage would have been, a good idea, but you could only, use leverage to move it just a little bit. But using ropes, they could do it better. But they worked around the problem with leverage because they didn't build with big rocks. They built with the manageable pieces. And used concrete. See, they had concrete to glue this stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing the thing they did. It's amazing the things they did. Go ahead, Hollywood Rape.
Yeah, so basically you feel that they achieved what they did through their own ingenuity. I guess you would say it would be evolution instead of another source that gave them this knowledge.
Yes, they developed it on their own, and in fact, my first discovery was what it turned out to be the longest bridge in the ancient world, but it was made out of stone and concrete and arches, and it was two towers with a suspension bridge and high strength rope, which the whole world used. Yucatan Mexican rope before the nylon rope came out. I mean, so it was 18,000 psi, which is almost as strong as steel. So I started working on those elements. I said, how did they make all these different pieces? So I went back and I found the methodology they used for each of these, which goes back to your question. They developed each of them as they came along, and synergistically, they combined things together to make other inventions that were helpful in resisting the environment and helping people to survive, or building large buildings.
So basically, the get in a nutshell, survival brought up the ingenuity. They had to survive, and that ultimately, got them going to everything they're doing.
Absolutely, and it all started because they had poor soil, and they had 6 months of torrential rain, and then a 6-month virtual desert. Those are the main things that got them rolling, and they started developing water systems and methods of agriculture that were 4 times better than, that produced 4 times as much produce as you would get normally with a normal conventional farming system. And all of these go back to the engineering systems that were used.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing what one would do when they have to survive and when they have to build a future. It's amazing that humans don't get enough credit. A lot of people like to say that, the Egyptians used aliens, the Mayans used aliens, but they give very little credit to how just amazing human beings can be and how creative they could be. To create all this stuff from scratch, because that's really how they did it. They did it from scratch. They had nothing, and like you said, they had an instinct to survive, and they decided to start building. Now, James, I wanted to lead right back into the conversation we're having about the Mayans. Their astronomical records indicate that the Mayans knew about the composition of the 3 stars in Orion's belt, and that one was a nebula. Of course, Europeans did not know this until they had optional instruments. How the heck did they achieve this knowledge?
How did you know that? That's one of my favorite. Did I have it in the book? I can't think of it, but if I did, I don't think I did. But I got another book that's been outlined. I'm going to get in detail about things that I didn't get in detail in this book. Now, they had several different devices to view the heavens. I'm not talking about the marks on their observatories where they knew when a planet was going to rise at that mark, etc. They used a sighting tube to try to concentrate on certain heavenly bodies. Now, have you ever seen the stars during the day?
No.
First time I saw them Well, this is how you do it. You got to really look in a long tube. And the first time I ever did was looking up a chimney, which is a long tube that blocks all the light out. I could see the sky was, the part I could see at the top of the chimney was dark, and I could see stars glittering in it. And that was a big joke when we were kids, okay? The next time was when I was down about 60 feet in a foundation for a big building that I was designing, and I had to go look at make sure the foundation was correct. And I looked up, and I could see the stars really clear. Now, the Maya used a long sighting tube, so when they wanted to look at an object, they could isolate all the light from that object. You know, some of these, we're talking about the three stars in Orion's belt, and they're 15, 20 million light years away. But there's two other things. One, there is a method of training your eye, strengthening your eyesight, so you can see 2 or 3 times better at a distance than a normal person. This has been, I've read about this in medical books, etc. In fact, let's take training any muscle in the body, like running. When I was in college, man first broke the 4-minute mile, and I was a track person, and I got close. Okay, now with all the exercise and all the new systems, they're running it in 3 minutes and 48 or 50 seconds or something, 20 seconds faster, because they've trained. Okay, so you can train your eyes the same way. So they had this ability to project their visions, because it actually is a medical fact. You can do that. Thirdly, they had 100 hallucinogens and drugs that enhanced your vision, enhanced all your things. The Europeans only had 50, but the Maya had the jungle and the rainforest around them, and people I know that are really into, and they're mostly archaeologists, that are into the hallucinogens and the drugs that the Maya took to have their hallucinations. This is where they saw their, there's your ancestors. They saw their ancestors. They didn't particularly worship them, but they conferred with them through these, they'd auto-sacrifice and bleed from certain parts of their body, and then they would also take drugs. And so between the drugs, the projection of the eye, and the collection of the light from a certain heavenly object, a star or a planet, you could really see a lot better.
Now, was any of these drugs ayahuasca or DMT?
I don't know. But if it dilated the pupil, you had a drug that would help you see for a distance. And this was not like a recreational drug. These are worker guys that studied stars, and probably had people that really worked at being, really good at developing their eyesight and for viewing. Well, first of all, some people have got unbelievable vision. Ted Williams, when he was batting, he swore that he could see the stitches on the ball as it turned as it came towards him. That's why he was such a great hitter.
Right.
And so, some people are born that way. So let's say the Maya tested all the kids for the eyesight, picked the best ones, and had them train their eyes and use these sighting tubes and slipped them a little bit of, I almost named 6 plants. So one of the big ones comes from the water lily. It's very good for that. So that's how I think they did it. Mm-hmm. But they always showed, in the Dresden Codex, that when they show the Orion's belt, they'll show 2 solid dots and a fuzzy one. That was a good question.
I want to ask your guest a question. Also, just out of curiosity, and please excuse my ignorance, their form of government, the Mayan form of government, was it kind of like ours, like we have now here in the U.S., or was it more towards the socialist type?
No, it was different. It was like they have in England, where they had a king or a queen and a family that ruled, and the children became princes and then became kings or queens, and sometimes they would, just like in Europe, the Hohenzollerns would marry the British whole royal family, and they'd bond two countries together, etc. And they would do that. Tikal would marry princes off to Kalakmul, say, okay, and they would bond together by blood, the two cities, so they'd have peace for a while. And then, like, who was it? The Queen Elizabeth I got all upset when Queen Victoria got all upset when their cousin Willie invaded in the First World War. Her words were, "Cousin Willie wouldn't do that." Well, that was a bad war, but cousin Willie did it anyway. Okay, even though they were family,
So basically, it was all in the family, because when I read about England and all that, basically they keep it all within the blood. They are afraid of mixing out of their own type of thing. It's kind of like what the Egyptians did for a while.
It explains a lot of Prince Charles, doesn't it?
Yeah, right. But the Maya carried it further. They had the scribes and the sculptors to be members of the royal family. Maybe they were princes or something like that. And they would learn to be scribes at court. That way they had somebody that would keep their mouth shut about what was happening in court. They did keep records, because there's lots of paintings on these vases, Maya vases, that shows a proceeding going on in court, and then there's always a scribe over in the corner writing down the dialogue that went on. And a lot of the monuments are carved and is signed by a person who is of royal lineage. So they kept all this stuff close to the family. So it was a family business.
Mm-hmm.
Or dynasty.
You just say, wait a minute, hold on. You just said it was a family business?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you, sir. Your name again, James?
Okon. Yes, it is. You call me Jim.
Okay, Jim, I want to thank you for answering my questions, and I want to thank you, Jackal, for letting me call into your show and be a part of it.
Not a problem, brother. You're welcome to call in anytime. Thank you.
All right, bro. Peace.
Take care. That's the great Hollywood rape of YouTube fame. He's famous in his own world. He really is. James, real quick question. What were the reactions that some archaeologists gave you when you started, working on this book? What were some of the reactions you got when you put this book together?
By the time the book was going to be, was ready to be reviewed. Okay, the guy that really did a lot of this stuff with me and went on a lot of the trips when I had something really ready to prove, his name was Nicholas Helmuth. He told me, well, get ready, because you're going to come up with stuff that are really conventional wisdom and truths that the Mayanists, the archaeologists think are true, and you're going to burst their bubble. And so get ready to get roasted and toasted and, blown away. Well, I went to 4 really famous archaeologists. One of them was NASA's top guy. Another one was 40 years editor of archaeology for National Geographic. Another one was the greatest, one of the most famous epigrapher. That's to read the hieroglyphs now. And the other one runs a big Maya research institute. They all said yes, and I was really blown away. And when they all came back they had some comments to make, like, the Maya didn't have the zero 1,300 years before the Europeans. It was only 900. That was no big deal. I said, okay. And the date on the first date that was written on this, blah, 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 was 31 BC, and it wasn't 250 BC. Okay, I'll make that change. Nothing about, and they get to the part, and they all sent me their manuscripts back with notes on them, and they get to the part about the tools, the jadeite tools, and they'd say things like, I didn't know that. And they look at a picture, a photograph of these tools, and they say, are these real? Are these artifacts? And these are really interesting. Nobody said I didn't know that much about draft animals. But the greatest one was Ed Barnard, who's a great guy, who wrote at the end when the last Maya was dying on the road, and the sun was overhead. He said, "Bummer. Can we have a happy ending?"
There can never be a happy ending, ever.
Yeah, I said no, but I did do something that really. My editor told my editor about that, and she said, "What happened between the time of the 900 and 1500 when the conquistadors came?" I said, "Oh, things happen." She said, "Prove it. How do we know those Maya that met the conquistadors were really the Maya, and somebody else didn't come in and take their place?" Well, I thought I knew that it hadn't happened, but I did a lot of research and wrote another 11 or 12 pages. It took them all the way up to Cancun, and they were the real Maya all the time. So, but so the answer is they loved it. And if you look in the back of the book, two of them, there's Mark Van Stone and Ed Barnhart, who I just talked about the bummer routine, are giving it great reviews about the Maya can stand shoulder to shoulder with any ancient civilization, including the Romans, and hold their heads high. And then the other two chaps are on they're on Amazon. So I've got nothing but 5-star reviews, and I am really surprised. I wrote this book just trying to get the truth out, and everybody says, and that's just a nice writing style. It was so easy breezy. It was easy to read. So I'm really happy. I'm pleased.
Hey, I'll tell you what, I'm living proof of it, because I just went through the book the last 2 weeks, like I said, and it does read very easy. It actually has a bunch of cool pictures, and it's not like some books that you get that have like one picture in the middle of the book. Now, this has a lot of pictures, and us dumb Americans, we love pictures. So, we have to have some pictures in there to keep us entertained while we're reading. But there is a lot of really cool information in here that, like I said, I had never knew about, and I've always been interested in the Mayan culture and the Mayan civilization. So it's cool to know something that we didn't know about. If you really want to know anything about the Mayans that you didn't know about already, this is definitely a good book to get. I highly recommend it. But you know what? Give me some, examples of misconceptions of archaeologists, relative to the Mayan technology. What's some of the major misconceptions they had about their technology?
Okay, let me just get the high ones. The tools. When you look at Maya carvings and sculpture, it's so fine and so articulated, and it's otherworldly and it's exotic, and it's done with great style and fineness. Well, the archaeologists thought it was done with flint tools and rocks that they just carve these things up. You couldn't carve that kind of fine carving with flint tools. It needed something special and something hard. Well, when I broke the jadeite tools on them, they were really surprised and pleased that there was something out there that they hadn't even thought about. Then we get to the cement. They didn't know about the cement. They said, "That's just mortar, isn't it?" I said, "Well, cement is mortar. Well, mortar's made from cement, and so is stucco." And I'd say this would go back to, I put my hand on a wall that was a little bit ruined, and there would be concrete there, and I'd say, "Isn't this concrete?" They say, "No, that's just mortar." They were Stone Age people. They couldn't make concrete. Well, I would say, as an engineer, it feels like concrete, it smells like concrete, and it holds like concrete. I think we got concrete here, okay? And inside these arches, they would put these really strong, like beams across right at the at what we call the spring line, and we go from verticals into a curved structure inside, and it was to keep the structure together, because when you start curving it, it tries to pull apart. So they had these really strong, what I call thrust beams in there, and they were like 18,000 pounds psi, again, like steel, and they were cemented into the wall. I cannot convince to this day most archaeologists that those were really structural members. They thought they were either rafters for an attic, they were to hang clothes on, they were to put drapes on, or they were to hang hammocks from. I mean, I could go on and on and on. It's utterly ridiculous. But there was a lot of them. And now that I've showed them how it worked, and I really didn't show any computer printouts or anything in the book. I just said it works, and this is how it works, and blah blah blah. This is how they built it, blah blah blah, and they bought it. And I was really pleased that They said, I told them what I was going to do. I showed them how to do it, and I showed them the product, and they said, nobody ever did that before. It's like popular mechanics.
The guys were listening to Mr. James Okon talk about the lost secrets of the Mayan technology. We have about 10 minutes before we're gone for the night, so if anybody wants to get in on the phone, please do so, 786-245-8127. Lines are open for the last 10 minutes, and all your questions will be answered by Mr. Okon. I do have another question for you, though, here. There's a bridge located in the Yaxchilan, I think I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, part of Mexico that you have, of course, you talk about in this book. Now, did you receive any resistance from archaeologists when you stated your opinion on that bridge?
That's the bridge at Yaxchilan.
Yaxchilan, there we go.
The X in Maya is always like S, so it's Yash. So anyway, yes, I did. They ignored me completely. I gave lectures at International Symposium, and the History Channel did a story on it. National Geographic did a story on it. And usually when you get something in National Geo, it's like the Bible, right?
Right.
By coincidence, the guy that put the story in is one of the reviewers that at that time was still archaeological editor of National Geo. And I'd give symposium to computer groups. I did a lot of computer stuff, fly-throughs, 3D fly-throughs, and 3D modeling of the bridge in the city, which really sells the job. Okay, and our engineers loved it, and they bought it, and the whole thing just looked logical and real. And the archaeologists just kept quiet about it, and they said it was those two ruins. All that's left is a really nice platform with some stairs on it on the plaza. And then down on the river level, there's two 30-foot diameter ruins of what were towers at one time that held the middle parts of the bridge. You saw the photograph. The image. So people just didn't. Well, the thing that really, two of the guys that really turned out to be my partners in concrete were two really good, great professors. I'm talking about human beings. They were professors from the Autonomous University of Mexico, and they were publishing an article in a science magazine in Mexico called Ciencia, and they were going to prove that I was absolutely wrong. What does the gringo know about Maya bridges, right? So they started doing all the analysis, and they went out and got I couldn't have done this, got actual samples of the concrete from the bridge structures and stuff like that. They came in and tested it, and by the end of the article, they were believers. I had two apostles there, okay, that went and wrote a real big thesis on the bridge, and they ran it through computers. They did seismic analysis and wind analysis and checked all everything, and even did a design and a cost estimate to rebuild the bridge. So I met him on the internet, and we've never met. We've only interchanged ideas on the internet, and I give him full credit in Chapter 6, which is the testing of concrete. And they are so pleased with that because they were going to prove that I was wrong, but they actually did a better job at proving that the bridge was real than I put in my name on papers because they were so complex. It was unbelievable. They were great. So anyway, yes, I've seen people turned completely that were absolutely decided that the project was not real, and et cetera, but somehow those big piers in the river and the structures on the shore and the need for bridge, because this city was in a big meander in the river, and 6 months a year you got floods during the rainy season. Floods that were like, the river was flooded. It was like 15, 20 feet higher on its banks. It was like 600 feet wide, and you could not get off that island because of the almost completely surrounded by water, except the back end, which was, a tall mountain. But they didn't want to go that way. They wanted to go the other way, which was north, which was where their hinterlands or their villages and their agriculture was. So they needed a bridge. And
was there like was it really a jungle-like environment out there?
oh yeah, this is a great rainforest. Lots of howler monkeys and gazillions of insects and parrots and macaws and unbelievable stuff.
So did you guys encountered any wild animals? Any animals that maybe had, maybe predators or gorillas or anything like that?
Yes, but they were carrying AK-47s. And they captured me, and they thought I was CIA. That's in the book, too, by the way, and how I got away. And how I got to the Zapatista lines. They were easier.
Right. They were a little bit easier than the gorillas? Oh, I think we lost Mr. Jim Okon. Let's call him back up here real quick. This one was on him, though. And yet, his line is busy, so there's something going on with his line. Well, we're almost about to wrap up the show anyway. I would hate to end it like that. So let's see if we can get him back on the line here. Okon, there we go. Man, I thought we had lost you there. This time was on your end, my friend.
Okay, so how did it get to the Zapatista lines? I didn't see Comandante Marcos, but I had a carton of Marlboros and a quart of tequila, and you know what? I became the best friend they ever had in their life.
Nice.
In fact, I tried. I'm born on the same day as Emilio Zapata. I tried to convince him since I was born on August 8th, and he was too. Maybe they could make me an honorary member, but they didn't care. They were busy dividing up the cigarettes, and I don't know what happened to the tequila, but I took off and just went on down to the river. But yeah, I've had a few ventures. Lots of jaguars, particularly in the old days. They're getting more scarce now because there's a lot of civilization there, and tapirs and coatimundes, lots and lots of monkeys. Oh yeah, I love them. There's howler monkeys and there's spider monkeys and iguanas and what I'm doing is talking about the food we ate. We would hire, usually they have a guardian and his family there. We'd bring in beans and rice and onions and tomatoes and stuff like that they may not have there, and the lady would cook for us, and we'd have beans and rice and some nice little white meat, and we were afraid to ask, and one night it would be mono, which is monkey, another night it would be iguana, and the last night I said, is this monkey or iguana? She said, no, that's chicken.
Nice. There you go.
That's right.
Now, before we get off the show, because we're almost out of time, does their scientific proof convince now people or archaeologists that the Maya were technologically advanced at the end of the day?
Yes, they are, and I really haven't announced it in any public forum. But everybody knows what the technology brought us, and they don't think about it. Every time you go to the grocery store and you buy corn or tomatoes or beans or avocados or pineapples, so they go on, or chocolate, or these are all things that the Maya actually grew as part of their agronomy. And the world, they changed. Can you imagine chili con carne or any pepper from China or from India or from Thailand? And they think that they think 500 years later that they are native to those countries. All capsaicin, that's what the enzyme. That's what the main hot part of chili is the capsaicin. All came from the Yucatan. So
the Mayans are even responsible for our chili with carne.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. Okay.
So what's the next step now into the next investigation to the secrets of the Maya for you?
Well, I'm getting through a bunch of these interviews, and I'll be. I'm a member of the Explorers Club, which I'm really proud of, because it's Neil Armstrong and Sir Edmund Hillary and Admiral Byrd and Admiral Perry. When you have a blown the Cubs, they had those members. I don't feel like Groucho Marx anymore. Remember, he said I wouldn't become a member of a club that would have him as a member. Well, I am really proud, and they've asked me to speak in September. I am so proud that my club has asked me to announce these discoveries in public for the first time. So that's a great honor for me. I'll be working on that and a lot of other things this summer. I have a granddaughter who thinks she's going to be. She wants to just go on speaking tours, but she didn't want to write the book. She's 9 years old.
That's beautiful.
So we'll be in Mexico and doing a lot of things, but we have lots and lots of talks and interviews, and there's no such thing as book signings anymore. I mean, there's no bookstores. You mentioned Borders before. You got to get out. It hurts me too to say they don't exist, and it really was sad to see them close down.
Yeah.
But all we got left is Barnes and Noble, and I won't say anything about Amazon, but they're running all the little mom and pops out of business. But they
really are. Now, is the book also available on like Kindle and PDF form that people can buy from you?
It is on Kindle, and make sure you've got a Kindle Fire, because those photographs that you were talking about before are really good. And I thought they were good, but when George Stewart, who was the editor of Nat Geo for 40 years, stopped me at a function I was at. He said, "Jim, those are the best pictures I've ever seen in a book on the Maya." I said, "Coming from you, George, you mean the photos or the drawings?" He said, "Everything." I'm going, "Oh, that's an honor. That's a real compliment." So I'll be doing all that kind of stuff, talking to people and taking a blow, because I didn't realize what it was like. I thought you just turned it into a manuscript and they would clean it up and print it. It was a lot of work for almost a year after I wrote the book. And actually, they didn't change much. So, but there was a lot of conversation. So,
the work never ends, does it? I mean, you're going to be promoting this book for a long time. Give the website, get your website again, so everybody knows the website and how to get to the book.
It's theoldexplorer.com. www.theoldexplorer.com, and you could find the book. There's a link there. You can read the book. Every part of the book is sort of detailed there in a sort of short way. And there are links to Barnes & Noble and to Amazon on my site. But you can find me on Amazon. I think I'm number 8 today. Hey, I've been in the top 10 of the top 100 books in Amazon Mayan history for a couple of weeks. I am shocked. I really am. And I don't know how I'm going to do that, but up there. One day I'll be first, and next day, 2 days later, I'll be 40th, and I'll be back up again to 7th. I don't know how it works, but being somebody's buying books, be in Miami in November giving a talk at the Institute of Maya Studies, and I'll be at the Miami Book Fair signing books and hopefully giving a talk about the Maya secrets.
Please look me up. I'm in Miami, Florida. Please look me up so we can meet. I'd love to go out and meet you and see you at one of these lectures. Well,
14th of November, I think it's the date.
Good.
And but if not, I'll just go ahead and email you and tell you when it is. My producer's off the line right now, so I can't tell. So thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure and my honor, and I will be in contact with you shortly in the near future. Take care, Jim.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the author again of The Lost Secrets of the Maya Technology, Mr. James Okon.